I'm getting really, really old, but not too old to learn with Rabbi Litwack. Hey there.
That was a good one. I like that one.
Really, really, well, I am. It's true. I'm really, really old.
You're not really old, but we are getting older. And in some way, isn't that what we want to do?
I guess so. I
Because
have
the
been.
opposite is not good.
That's true. The opposite. You're right about that. I have always been one of those guys that I I embrace the gray. Like I love it. I'm fine with it. Doesn't bother me at all. Um, with wisdom comes age. I will tell you one thing about growing old is that I distinctly remember for the first, I guess, 12, 13 years of my rabbinate, using the excuse that you're not allowed to study Kabbalah until you're 40 as my reasoning for not understanding Kabbalah because I hadn't studied it yet. And then as soon as I turned 40, that excuse just flew out the window.
Right out the window.
Yeah. So we may be growing old, but we are most definitely not as old as the current President Biden and past President Trump, both of whom are hoping to be our president again in 2024, along with a number of other politicians who are, let's say, advanced in age. So we thought we'd talk today a little bit about how does Judaism see aging? Is there an age out for service or for offering advice or wisdom? I will say that if you look to Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, you only reach spiritual. When do you reach spiritual strength? Is it 70? I think you only reach spiritual strength, to give counsel at the age of 70. So what do you, let start us out here. Where does Judaism begin in its thinking about the aging process and how old is too old?
Okay, so let's start with what does Judaism think about aging? And the answer to that is that there's great deference, there's great respect for the elderly. Okay, I could list off any number of uh, verses and quotes out of Jewish tradition that talk about you shall rise before the aged and show deference to the old. That comes out of Leviticus. Gray hair is the crown of glory; it's attained by way of righteousness. Is Proverbs. Go into Talmud and he said to him, I do not remember. Let's see if I'm already old enough that I can't remember the quote. I did not remember what I did in my youth, but in the deeds of his old age, I remember. We look and we show tremendous respect to the elderly. There's a wonderful piece in Mishnah Kinim that says that Rabbi Shimon ben Akashia says, ignorant old people, the older they get, the more their intellect gets befuddled. Okay. And as it says, he removes the speech of men of trust, and takes away the sense of the elders. But when it comes to aged scholars, on the contrary, the older they get, the more their mind becomes composed. Right? As it is written, with aged men comes wisdom and understanding and length of days. Okay? Now, I think that that's a really good kicking off point for us because it recognizes that there is both positives and negatives when it comes to aging. It acknowledges that our bodies change as we grow older. I want to point out one other thing, and that is the Talmud uses two different terms. Right? There's zaken, right? And then there's seva. Right? And both are generally used when speaking about an older person. Now, the Torah
Oh,
doesn't tell us.
lissov. Sorry, I just made this connection. One of the words in Pirkei Avot is lissova. When you reached lissova, that's seva. I didn't
Yeah,
realize that.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And now, what is interesting is the Torah doesn't tell us what defines old. Right? Zaken, right, refers to a wise older person, but it doesn't refer to, it's not based on age. There are other things, like you mentioned in Pirkei Avot. You hit this certain age, you hit this certain age, you hit this certain age. You're supposed to attain certain things, but in the Torah, it doesn't really. It uses terms, but it doesn't always define them.
So is that to suggest that zikanim were not necessarily older people, but they were people of wisdom at whatever age they were?
I believe so.
Hmm.
Right? Now, I think that they are that wisdom does come with age. I don't think anybody has to disagree with that. Right? The more life experience we have, the more wisdom we have. But, right, and we could talk far more about this. But what I want to kind of drive at, right, is what happens when that um, uh, old age becomes a liability.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just before we do that, I suggested that our texts really are about veneration of old age. Our texts imagine a world where the elderly get maximal respect. In fact, respecting our parents becomes the basis for support of older leaders.
Right.
And that plays into the conversation or the suggestion that you had that we talk about. Um, so let's just for purposes of the discussion, right? There are points in Jewish tradition where age limits have come in. Right? I don't want us to get too hung up on the exact numbers, right? But rather the idea that there is a limit. Right? There is a certain point. Right? We know that that we get older, or that we live longer. Right? Over centuries, right, we've progressed enough, we've evolved enough, right, to be able to live longer, and so I just want us to be careful about looking at a text from Rashi from the 11th century or from the Talmud, which could be, 1,000 or 1,500 years before that. Right? So, look, there are many types of leaders. Right? There are officials, and I'm using terms that are found in biblical and rabbinic literature. There are officials, there are judges, there are kings, there are leaders of nations. Right? And I went looking to see what does it say about a king. All right, we can presume that um, in this context, presidents would fall into the same category as kings. Okay? And what's interesting about that is that Jewish law has no age restrictions when it comes to kings. In fact, throughout the history of the Jewish people, there have been many national leaders that have been quite old, right? And nobody that I know of was removed from their position due to age. They were removed from their position, but it wasn't an ageism piece.
I would say they were all pretty old.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, and that's generally speaking, I think that both in Jewish tradition and it has carried over into modern day politics, not just in America. It seems to me that it's certainly the not the loudest voices, the most powerful people. There are certainly younger folks in positions of power, but the most powerful of them, and perhaps this is connected to with age comes wisdom, but the most powerful of them are on the older side.
Yeah.
And
So
I would just say, sorry, one last thing, that because you said earlier that I think there are reasonable arguments that one could make that with age comes wisdom, and with age comes
impairment.
getting stuckness. Not even impairment, the inability to reimagine. Um,
That's
so
that's I think another aspect. Our brains become less elastic.
yes,
Right. All right. So let me finish the point in terms of saying the Talmud, even though there's no age limit for kings, the Talmud does, in fact, have an age limit for judges. Right? On the one hand, judges were only appointed to the Sanhedrin, that's like the Jewish Supreme Court, right, once they attained old age. Right? On the other hand, the Talmud tells us that for capital cases, we do not seat on the Sanhedrin a very old person or one who is sterile or one who doesn't have children.
what's that
Right?
source? Do you know the source?
Uh,
It's Sanhedrin, right?
I think so.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
got to be Sanhedrin. Okay.
Okay. And the reason for this is that these people may not be able to relate to somebody who has familial responsibilities and may not be as compassionate as they need to be. So there are two stages of old here, one that qualifies a person and another that disqualifies. Right? Maimonides repeats we shouldn't appoint to the Sanhedrin a man of very old age. That would be at this level, not at this level. Okay? Question is,
What is very old
what's
age?
the age?
Yeah.
All right. There's a considerable debate among the commentaries regarding the definition of very old, and the opinions range from 70 to 90 years. Okay. Based on Rashi, all right, he suggests that the maximum age for judges is 90. Right?
By the way, Rashi is a guy who died, like what, in his 40s, I think, or something. Yeah. I mean, to
Yes.
imagine I mean, it's interesting. You again, you mentioned this at the beginning. To think about lifespan or life expectancy, to suggest that 90 is old in his day and age is crazy. 50 is old.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, what is interesting in the question of what's too old to be a judge, despite those sort of rules, right, if an elderly candidate comes along and is uniquely qualified, right, and no peers can compare to him or her in their ability to judge, right, that person can be
Mm.
appointed as a judge. So let's just acknowledge we have two very elderly candidates for the presidency. Okay? Whether we like them or not, both have done the job. Right? So they are qualified. Okay? Question is, right, are they still qualified? Can a judge, and now I'm just reverting back, can a judge become too old? Right? And many sources are of the opinion that a sitting judge can remain in his or her position once they reach old age. Right?
So the you're too old argument is for new appointments. It's not necessarily an aging out of someone who's already. It's like the Supreme Court, right? I mean, they get to stay there until
For life.
whenever. Yeah.
Yeah, until or they decide that they're going to leave.
Right.
Now, others do counter that argument, all right, and suggest that a judge should be compelled to step down, all right, since the reason for not appointing an elderly person applies or should apply equally to the person in the
Yeah.
job,
Yeah.
all right. All of this, I think, really where we're getting to is where it becomes a challenge is that old age brings impairment. What does Judaism say about the leader who has cognitive impairment? Okay? And we can argue whether Biden has some sort of speech impediment that he works really hard to overcome, or that Trump speaks in what my friend calls word salad. Okay? He never finishes a sentence or a thought. He just puts a bunch of words in the bowl. Okay? All right, that can they be disqualified for being too old?
Well, wait. Let me just jump in for a moment because I think there's an important distinction between cognitive uh, decline and physical decline. Because, of course, Moshe, I mean, famously, had a speech impediment, and
Right.
he thought himself, ironically, I'm not qualified for this job, and God said, nah, don't worry about it, and we'll give you the support, the tools that you need to overcome this impediment, and you'll be able. So,
And Franklin Delano Roosevelt, all right, was in
right,
a wheelchair for you know
right.
large chunks of his
So the
presidency.
question is, and I don't know how you judge this. The one thing I'm sure of is that these tests that everyone keeps talking about presidents taking, these cognitive ability, are garbage. But so we're not talking about the speech impediment or the word salad unless those are symptoms of a cognitive decline.
Right,
Okay.
right. Now, so what do we do? All right, I want to offer two texts that I think are helpful, but not wholly so. All right. The first one comes out of Talmud Brachot 8b. All right, where it says that we're supposed to show respect for an old man who's forgotten his learning through no fault of his own. Right? And where do they get that idea? They get the idea that when Moses broke the tablets, all right, there we go, okay, broke the tablets the first time that he comes down from the mountain, okay, those shards, broken shards of the tablets, get put into the Ark of the Covenant along with the two tablets that get remade. Right? That is to say, right, even in a person's brokenness, right, they are showed a level of deference, all right, and respect, right? And there's another there's a couple of Talmudic texts about rabbis whose parents humiliate them in public because they really don't know better, and how these rabbis, just put their arm around their mother or father and say, "You'll be okay." Right? So both of these texts show um, elderly who have lost it, right, but are shown a, a level, a degree of respect. Right? Now, the problem with those texts is that while it's clear that we should maintain the dignity of our elders, neither one of those texts, right, suggests that the broken tablets are the ones we use, right? Or, all right, the mother or father who's crazy should be the one who's listened to. That is to say, they may not be, right, useful in the way that they used to be, okay? But that does not mean that we throw them out completely.
They still have value.
They still have intrinsic human value as human beings. Okay? But it doesn't say that we're supposed to, that we have to listen to them.
Hmm.
Right?
Let me. I just want to throw. So, the first text that I thought about when we decided to discuss this was, ironically, I don't think a text at all about aging, but it's what popped in my mind, and that was the story of the spies, and it's not really about the spies, but the Israelites and their response to the spies. So, Bikitsur, in short, the spies go in, they come back, they tell the story. The land is great, but the people are too big. We're going to be overwhelmed. The people didn't have faith in God, and God's answer to them is, you don't get to go in. You don't get to go in. You are stuck in the slave mentality, whatever the reason is. You're not ready to go in. Now, these are the folks who grew up in Egypt. They schlepped out of Egypt. These are grown-up people, whether they're old or not. Okay, but they're older. And God says to them, we need a whole new generation, a whole new young generation that doesn't have the experiences that you have to go into Israel. Now, God doesn't destroy all those old people in the wilderness. It's almost as if God carries them through the wilderness like the shattered pieces of the tablets, and so that they can give birth, create this new younger generation that actually can go in. And so that's the piece that for me I think is, I remember when Pete Buttigieg was running, I was really enamored by him. I think in part just because he was young, he had a lot of vigor, he had new ideas, and it was fascinating to me how the country said, at least some said, you're too young. You're too young to be president. We're not ready to put our faith in someone in their 40s to be president. That of course was not the whole reason, but that was, I think, a piece of it.
Kennedy was 42 right, when he was elected.
So I wonder if something's changed. I wonder if since then something has changed, that our candidates have gotten older and older. You were saying Reagan was what, 70 what?
He was
76
when 68 or 69 when he was first elected, and then I think it was 77 when he left. Right?
And he's the oldest up until Biden and Trump. Yeah,
that's correct. I think that we do have examples. Right? I'll take the story of King Saul, right? The first king of Israel. Right? Seems to be a reasonable guy until he starts to go cuckoo. Right? He goes a little crazy. Right? And what's interesting is that isn't the reason why he didn't have. He didn't last in his kingdom. Right? It wasn't because he was crazy; it's because he didn't follow God's rule. Right? But in the commentary around that story, right, they bring up David and Jonathan. Jonathan is Saul's son, and David is kind of a separate individual.
Young whippersnapper.
Young whippersnapper. right? And David and Jonathan love each other. Right? And the question is, why? Right? Well, right? It said that Jonathan loved David because he maintained the dignity of his father.
Mm.
Right?
Wait, Jonathan loved David or David loved Jonathan?
Jonathan loved David
Because he.
because David, right, maintained the dignity of Saul,
Oh, of
Jonathan's
Jonathan's
father.
father. Ah,
Right?
wow.
Even when he was pursuing him,
Yeah.
he was crazy enough that he was ready to get him and cut his head off.
That is definitely something we've lost today. The ability to pursue someone in a political arena and yet not degrade them.
Not to grade them.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
As that is, that's a fascinating. I love the image of Saul kind of going a little cuckoo. Because it's so true.
Look, and then you have Jonathan or David, okay, who comes in and does music therapy with him. All
Right.
right, plays his harp to soothe um, Saul, and Jonathan loves his friend, right, his brother from another mother, um, because David respected Saul, even though, all right, there were points where Saul pursued after him and was going to kill him.
Yeah. So
So,
I guess, I mean, so one of the takeaways from all of
yeah,
these texts, I think, is that there are lots of folks that are saying that age should matter, and lots of folks that are saying that age shouldn't matter in the upcoming presidential election. It sounds to me like it should matter as long as we are judging the candidates not by their age, but by whether their age has affected them cognitively. Uh,
correct.
and that even if it turns out that one or both or any of the candidates are too old for us to vote for, that doesn't mean, that does not give us privilege to degrade them, to discard them, to not honor who they are, what they've given, and so on and so forth.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well summarized.
That was fascinating. I did not know a lot of those texts. That was really, really wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Well,
That was
thank you.
awesome.
I think it
Um,
was, we know that it's coming up in the news. It's been a discussion topic, and to step back into Jewish tradition and to find texts that can inform us is what we're all about. So,
that really is, that is so important for us. I have these glasses that are they always sit by my desk. These are my look at the world through Jewish glasses, because when you
nice.
look at a light through these, everything turns into Jewish stars. But I have these here to remind myself that the goal is not to do Jewish things. The goal is to make everything Jewish. The goal is to see the whole world through these Jewish lenses, Jewish eyes, and to be able to bring to bear on important decisions that we make about who's going to be our president, to be able to bring to bear the wisdom of our tradition.
Well,
Everything is there. We just need to look for it.
that's right. And I will just say, stay tuned for face to face in the fall when we will answer the question of what does Judaism say about qualifications for presidency.
Oh my
Right?
goodness. All right, everyone.
Hey, thanks a
Thank you,
lot.
Rabbi. See you later.